Lengthy, perhaps predictable and far too familiar for some of us. Post because this happens way too often to people who are followed home by strangers, and I just wanted to vent about it. I, 26F, recently moved from the US to the Balkans for a summer legal internship. After a few days of getting settled in my home for the summer, I decided to sign up for a gym nearby my apartment to serve as a self-care ritual and blow off steam after tough work days. Coming home from my first workout at the new gym, Endorphins on 100, I noticed at a crosswalk that a man across from this busy street where I was stopped was staring at me. Now this is not super uncommon, as I have found in my new home, and I have gotten used to dealing with occasional male stares, but they are usually very brief. This guy, however, was not looking away. I stared back for a full beat, so I know he knows I saw him, hoping that would be the end of it, and then turned my head away to continue down the street, trying to avoid a creepy feeling that this wasn't the end of the interaction. From what I could tell, he didn't cross the lengthy street to meet me, and probably just continued down from his side. Next thing I know, about 2 minutes later, I'm at a crosswalk, about to cross, when I see him in my peripheral next to me at the stop. How he crossed the street and sped up to meet me so quickly is either a reflection of his cunning and athletic prowess or my general lack of observational skills. Standing next to me now, he is still staring at me, but I try not to tip him off to my noticing this. I take off as fast as I can when it's safe to cross the crosswalk, and naturally, he matches my pace, a step or so behind me, still staring. Here I find myself in a familiar situation that I imagine many who have been followed also find themselves in. It is a critical juncture, if you will, where you ask, is this someone following me or a silly misunderstanding? I begin to ask myself, am I overreacting? I have been followed many a time before, sadly, and so I have found that the best way to handle it is try to cut the baby in half, so to speak. I give them the benefit of the doubt to prove to me they aren't doing what I fear they are doing, while also trying to avoid any situation that would escalate the danger or cue him off to where I am going. Trust but verify. So I decide to zip quickly toward another street, not my own. We were like 1 block from my apartment by the time I noticed him at the crosswalk with me, in the hopes that he would prove me wrong and not continue to follow me. This was a busy intersection, and there were about 6 different streets to follow from the crosswalk. He follows me down this random street of choice, where there is truly only residential buildings, no stores or restaurants he could be headed toward, to explain him choosing this street unless he lived nearby. I do something I have done before, when followed, to test the other person. I slow down and speed up my pace randomly to see if they match mine, or like a normal person heading somewhere, try to walk by me, as there was plenty of room to do so on this street. Within a block or so I realized he was definitely following, definitely still staring, but not only that, with every few steps, I felt his presence, keeping pace, was also subtly getting closer and closer to me. The sun is setting at this point, and we are walking towards a part of town I don't know as well. The spirit moves, and I decide to make a break for it. I slow down as slow as I have gone throughout this whole pursuit, checking my peripheral, and jettison myself across the street until I get to the other side. I look back once I am there to see that he is now looking across the street and moving toward it to follow me more, but this time, I give him the meanest glare I can muster, and reach for my bag as if to suggest that I reaching for pepper spray or something. Hadn't bought some yet in reality because I had just moved to town a few days before. He notices the gestures, makes eye contact, stops, and then literally turns his head away to feign looking at the numbers on the street like he was lost or looking for a specific spot, as if he hasn't been slowing up and speeding down with me for the past 10 minutes, not looking anywhere but at my backside. Acting 0/10 for capturing the innocence of someone definitely not creepily following a woman half his age back from the gym for 20+ minutes. He continues to pretend to look around, glance back at me, look around some more, glance back at me, and when he looks away for the 3rd time, I decide now is the time to truly make a break for it. I begin booking it down the opposite street, while occasionally peering back to see if he kept following. I take a bunch of well-lit, busy streets, employing random unnecessary turns, as I have when I have been followed before. Eventually, once I check out the whole street and feel confident I have lost him, I finally calculate my way back home. The next day, I asked a friend from work who is local to take me to get some pepper spray. I bought a mini version, the smallest size, that can easily fit a purse. The pepper spray's brand's name for a bottle of this size is literally called Madam, which is emblazoned across the side of the bottle in bright pink lettering.
When my boyfriend and I first moved into our house, we didn't yet have a washer and dryer installed, so we'd take our clothes to a laundromat the next town over. It was a few minutes out of the way, but it was a place my boyfriend had frequented before I moved to join him in the area. The place was clean and decently maintained, and we felt good supporting a small family business. The people that ran the laundromat were 2 adults and their son. I believe the son was in his early 20s, and he was there every time we went. I got the impression he didn't have much of a life outside of work, but he was always friendly, talking to patrons, mostly about sports and the like. One thing about the son, however, is he could be a little too hands-on helpful. For example, the second your dryer load was done, he'd come flying over to alert you, even if you were standing right next to the machine. He'd stand there and wait for you to unload and then immediately start wiping down the inside. I assume this was probably a routine his mom had ingrained into him to make sure the dryers were always clean and dry, but it could make things feel a bit awkward and rushed. At first my boyfriend and I would go together and do our own separate loads. But since I wasn't working at the time, I figured I could do both of ours on my own during the work week. The first trip I took by myself went fine. It was a less busy day, and while I'm not much of a talker, I'm sure the owner's son and I exchanged a few words during that time. At one point I'd just unloaded the dryer and was busy folding clothes when he walked over to return an article of clothing I'd left behind. I appreciated the gesture, but I found it a little odd that he didn't just hand me my piece of clothing, rather, he was swinging it around the tip of his finger and grinning. I shrugged it off as him being bored. His act of customer service did prompt me to write a short online review. I'd noticed other people had made complaints about the mother being rude or pushy. One even made a snide remark about a Chinaman, pretty sure the family was Korean. They'd always seemed okay to me, and I figured I'd add some positivity. The guy had been on his own that day, and, still wanting to be supportive of a small town business, I noted the quality of service with a few kind words. I later wondered if doing so had been a mistake. Exactly a week later I went back to do our weekly laundry load. When I pulled up, I noticed there were no other cars in the parking lot. As I was backing my car into a space, I saw the son standing in the doorway. He was grinning and watching me pull in. He was definitely extra friendly on this day, and there was a different vibe to his typical extroversion. It was the middle of the day and the laundromat was close to a busy gas station, so it wasn't like I was completely isolated and alone. But something felt very off about being alone with him. I sat at a table by the window and did my best to keep myself occupied. When I got up to grab my clothes from the washer, he smiled from where he was sitting and asked, "How does it feel being the only ones in here today?" I was already unnerved being alone as it was. I just smiled and went, "Hey, yeah," and continued unloading clothes. He then started trying to make conversation. "I was thinking about going to the water park tomorrow. Wednesdays are my only day off." He mentioned that he can never find anyone to go with, and asked if I liked going to that water park. I said that I hadn't been yet. He basically repeated what he'd said before, including the part where he can never find anyone to go with. At this point, as creepy as it was starting to feel, I was also amused because I knew he'd seen me in there with my boyfriend many times, and I was clearly doing laundry for 2. That, and I was well over a decade older than this kid. I still figured he was just making bored small talk, so I nodded and continued with what I was doing. But then he asked, "When you go swimming, do you wear a 1-piece or a 2-piece swimsuit?" Excuse me. "Oh, I haven't gone swimming in years," I said, trying to evade the question. He asked the question again, like he hadn't asked it already. "Well, when you do go swimming, do you like to wear a 1-piece or 2-piece swimsuit?" Again, I tried to evade the question, saying I hadn't gone swimming in years. But he kept repeating the question, trying to get me to answer. He would just not let up. I am blessed in certain areas, and while I'm not running around like Kelly Bundy most of the time, I do dress in a manner that, while tame in most places I've lived, is considered less modest than the average woman where I live. But even at that, I am not Stifler's mom. I don't know what kind of MILF fantasy this dude had cooked up since we'd last met, but he seemed to think his pervy line of questioning was going to lead to something. I don't remember how this conversation even ended, but I did my best to avoid him while I waited for my laundry to dry. Unfortunately, this included having him alert me when my dryer was done. The dryers didn't always do a thorough job the first time, so while I was adding extra quarters, the guy opened the machine, reached in and started pushing my laundry, which was my underwear in this case, to the middle of the machine. I was never coming back to this place. When I went home, I told my boyfriend about the incident, and he was just as disgusted by the guy's line of questioning. A week later, we had a new washer and dryer set installed. Most scared I've ever been after my second year in college, I booked an Airbnb for a close friend and I that I had been eyeing for a while. It was an off-grid yacht, not a typical stay for me. The yacht was situated on a dirt road 10 minutes from the main road. To get there, it was less of an address and more of a, turn right at the 2 tires stacked, continue for a mile, go north at the fork. The first night was great. The next day, we explored around town then returned to our yacht to hang out. I didn't see any neighbors, only homes in the far distance, so given the heat I felt comfortable wandering topless around our yacht. When night came, I slept naked. We heard, what we assumed to be, a distant party early in the night. Loud music was traveling from far away. Sometime along the night, the music stopped and I fell asleep. A while later, my friend, still awake, heard 2 men's voices speaking to each other. Their voices got closer and closer, until one started shushing the other and they started talking in whispers. Suddenly, they stopped talking and walked directly up to our yacht, shining a flashlight at the walls. All our belongings were inside, but my car and our shoes, very obviously 2 women's, were directly outside the yacht. They then turned the flashlight off. Up until this point, I had been asleep, but awake to what, in my mind, sounded like a stampeding herd of animals growing closer. I remember being in a half-dream, half-awake state, where I genuinely thought there was a galloping animal charging our yacht. What my friend later shared with me was that she was pinching me as hard as she could, and that's how I finally woke up. I never felt the pinch. I remember gasping as I opened my eyes for some reason, as I was laying on my back in bed. My friend was laying on her side facing me, and she immediately brought her finger to her mouth to shush me. I was now fully awake, but frozen because I had no idea what was going on. We couldn't talk because the desert air carried every sound, every creak of the bed, and I was trying hard to breathe calmly. Since I was on my back, it was difficult to face her without making a sound, so I had my head slightly turned to see what she was whispering. Every minute, the wind would pick up and all we could hear was the breeze. The next minute, complete silence except for their footsteps in the dirt slowly walking around us. At one point, they stomped loudly all around our yacht, and I realized that must have been what I thought was the stampeding animals. It got silent again, and just when we thought they must have left, we heard the faintest sound of footsteps encircling us. I'm a very shy, timid person, but my fight or flight kicked in as wanting to scream as loudly and deeply as I could, "What the bleep do you think you're doing?" and yell and fight and kick. My friend was the opposite, and told me we need to be absolutely silent. We were communicating on her notes app with the brightness turned all the way down. When it had been what felt like eternity, she texted 911. The dispatcher was absolutely useless and wouldn't send someone out because we didn't have an address. We kept texting them that we were on a dirt road, and all we had were the directions we sent them, and begged to send someone out. We didn't want the men to know we were on a phone because the screen's brightness was still bright against the complete darkness, so we gave up on texting. I hated myself for not wearing pajamas, for not having all my self-protection tools under my pillow and instead in my bag on the floor. I remember completely accepting that I may get stabbed. I thought about what it would be like for my family to find out I'm dead, and how sorry I felt to not explain. I remember in the middle of this eternal frozen state, I heard the zipper rattling, and for the first time my friend and I broke silence and yelled, now, as if to cue me leaping to my bag of self-defense items by the door to pull my alarm, sound off my taser, and yell that 911 was on their way as my friend dialed them on speaker. I remember making ourselves as loud as we could. I remember the distant siren approaching closer, and I remember packing up my belongings quicker than I ever have in my entire life. When a police officer arrived, he waited as we packed up our bags into my car. He said we shouldn't be staying so far away from the main road, and we agreed. It was supposed to be just a fun Airbnb. As we were about to pack up our last thing, my friend noticed large footprints in the otherwise perfect sand around our tent. They were inches from the tent, and we hand-walked up that close because to get that close, you had to step over a circle of rocks decorating the border of our yacht. We only entered through the front door zipper where the rocks ended. The officer didn't believe it wasn't ours, despite the significantly larger footprints. He said he had been patrolling the area with police dogs, and that was what we must have heard. I hate that I second-guessed myself for the rest of the night, thinking we may had just scared ourselves over nothing. High on adrenaline, we made the drive home non-stop. We slept together at my house. I was shaking for the rest of the night, and we both slept with stuffed animals, which at our age was very out of the norm. In the morning, I walked her out to her car to say goodbye. I froze when I got to my car, because covering every inch were the largest, meatiest, handprints in brown dirt. I consider my brother a big guy, and even his hand was smaller than the handprints on my car. I was so angry the police officer didn't see that. But I was also glad I had proof that someone was there that night. I took so many pictures because I never wanted to forget the image of so many handprints as evidence. The most unsettling part was that my friend shared with me there had been many recent unsolved murders in Wonder Valley within the year before. When she got home, she researched to ease her mind what the area was like, and found articles of missing people minutes from our site. I literally recognized every road the articles mentioned as the roads leading to our yacht. I realize you may be thinking nothing horrendous happened to us. But I have never felt that deep in my gut, subconscious, complete acceptance that I may end up dead that night. It was a complete gut feeling and I don't know how else to describe it. Creepy encounter while babysitting. Good day everyone. This is something that happened this past Friday while I was babysitting. For a little bit of context, I'm 21F, a college student, and have been babysitting since I was 14. I'm not an expert on literally anything, however over the years I have learned caution and resilience. At age 15 I took babysitting classes at our youth center, as well as a female self-defense course. So I babysit at least once a month for this one family. I like them because they pay me more than my usual hourly rate, they have a big house with internet that I can use to do homework, and the two kids are surprisingly well behaved and compliant. So the two parents have like a monthly ritual of going out around 5 p.m. and returning a little after 2 a.m. I'm always offered to sleep in the guest bedroom and stay until morning. I usually just stay awake and abuse their satellite TV and then leave when they come back. The house is in a nice neighborhood without a whole lot of neighbors. Very quiet. Also, their house is armed with an alarm system that I have the code to and can arm and disarm it through my phone. That'll be relevant in a little while. So I always take them for pizza at this place that has like an arcade. I do this so that they tire themselves out and go to bed early. Plus the little girl that I babysit is also on a mission to win a family of stuffed animals from the prize store, so I'd be the world's worst babysitter if I didn't guide her in that pursuit. If anyone's maybe wondering for whatever reason, after Friday night, she only needs the daddy stuffed animal before her collection is complete. Go girl. Anywho, I'm rambling. I was sitting at a table and watching them play in a ball pit, while also texting on my phone. This couple came over and sat at the same table as me. It was a long table with parents scattered here and there, so this wasn't alarming. The couple looked normal enough. Both were probably in their mid-20s, possibly a little older. They talked to each other, but then the guy asked me, "Are you the one babysitting Dr. So-and-so's kids?" So the parents of these children are both doctors, and the specific region that we live in, this would be common enough information, but I still chose to answer their question with an irrelevant statement. I wonder what they use to make the pizza here. Yeah, I know. I'm a master of deception. I deserve an Oscar for my performance. However, they seemed to see right through my clever ruse. They started making weird comments. They talked about the kids' parents, they commented on the daughter, and how they wondered if she would look as pretty as their mom. Okay, my dudes. I don't know if that was intended to be creepy, but I'm just going to be safe and pretend that it was. Then the woman says to me, and I quote, "Do they really let you dress like that while watching their kids?" She motioned with her eyes towards my t-shirt, which was admittedly a little tight, though aside from a little bit of a bosom crack, not revealing. I have a thin frame and a large chest. It's 90 degrees in my region of the US right now, so it's not like I can wear a hoodie, and my tits have a Crips and Bloods type relationship with any kind of shirt that has buttons. I saw that as my cue to go and get the kiddos and bring them to get their prizes so that we could bounce. After some very thought-provoking philosophical debating, they both got their prizes and we headed back over to the house. So fast forward a few hours. Both kids were bathed and put to sleep. I delivered a heartwarming rendition of Goodnight Moon and read a very spooky chapter of The Werewolf of Fever Swamp and tucked them into dreamland. It was around 9 p.m. I was caught up on homework and was just watching TV when I heard some movement on the porch. I didn't think much of it at first, but the doorknob started rattling violently. I initially started moving towards the front door to see who it was, but miraculously I remembered that it was late at night, I was home alone with two kids, and I very much wanted to live. I turned around to grab my purse, which is where I keep my taser. As I'm moving, the back door starts rattling as well, and was accompanied by some banging noises. That's when I remembered that I hadn't enabled the alarm system after returning. Now, if this was a horror movie scenario, of course the alarm wouldn't have worked, and the intruders would have made their way inside. I hate to disappoint if you were expecting something more exciting, but I enabled it again quite easily with no incident. I ran upstairs and grabbed the two kids, I put them in their parents' room in the walk-in closet. I still hate that I scared them. When I gathered them up, I gave no context as to what was going on. I didn't want to tell them that someone was trying to break into the house, but in the process the fear of not knowing seemed to be worse. I instructed them to stay in there and stay quiet, and only to open the door if they hear me talking to them. I then locked the bedroom door, which is the only door on the upstairs floor that locks. I sat there with my taser out and hit the panic button on the phone app. Several minutes went by, then I got the notification through the app that the alarm system was disabled. I planned on calling 911, even though the panic button already took care of that. But I found it more beneficial to arm it back. Then it disarmed again, so I armed it again. Then it disarmed once again, so I armed it once again. By this time I could hear what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps walking up the stairs. Good job, girl, you locked yourself inside with 2 potential assailants. I was holding it together for the sake of the kids, but not too deep inside. I was scared to death. When I heard the footsteps get near the door, and saw the knob twisting, I took a deep breath and pulled the trigger on my taser, just to let them know that I was armed, though it realistically wouldn't do much good. I informed them through the door that the alarm was triggered and police were on their way. Thankfully I was greeted by a familiar voice. My name, it's Doctor, his name. You're safe. I opened the door and ran into their arms and started sobbing. I hadn't realized truly until it was over just how scared I really was. The kids came out, without me giving them the okay, but their parents were there, so I'll let it slide. When I enabled the alarm on my phone, they both got the notification from the place they were at. With the app, you have the option to view the porch cameras as well. When they got the notification that the panic button was activated, they saw through the camera that there were people on each side of the house, 1 man, 1 woman. When the alarm kept disarming, that was them trying to get into the house. Police report was filed by them and In gave a statement mentioning the 2 weirdos I met earlier that day, even though there was really no evidence that would directly point to them. Camera footage didn't give any positive face IDs either. So, yeah, I was scared. I'm getting over it now. I'm just grateful that the couple that I was babysitting for were close enough to make it to me. I hate to say it, but I find the police response time to be terrible. I'm currently back in my own apartment an hour away. I checked in once to see how the kids were doing, and they're holding up fine. I'm just glad they had proper protection in their home and that this didn't end up to be any worse.